Hello, I am Linda Jo Martin, the book lady, and this is my August wrap-up. And so I finished a couple of books in August, maybe like 3 or 4. It wasn't the best reading month ever. I started with reading Shepherd's Abiding by Jan Karon, the Mitford book, because I'm in the Mitford read-along. I never actually make it to the end of the month discussion groups, but I do read the books. And Shepherd's Abiding was Christmas Story. Christmas Story in August does seem a little out of place. It wasn't the most exciting Christmas story ever, probably, but I enjoyed the book and wasn't offended by it, which is a good thing. It is a Christian book. So I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and then I also finished an audio book. Okay, checking my notes. Oh, I finished first the audio book of Hollywood Eden. Electric Guitars, Fast Cars, and the Myth of the California Paradise. And I guess I was really interested in the myth of the California Paradise, but I got more electric guitars and fast cars. So basically the book was about the musicians Jan and Dean and a lot of other musicians in Southern California during the 1950s and 60s, and I was not really familiar with a lot of the things I read, the music that I read about, even though I was a teenager in the 1960s. I wasn't really all that into Southern California music. I was more into the San Francisco sound because I was a San Francisco Bay Area girl. So everything that was going on in Southern California, like the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean and Nancy Sinatra, well, they're in this book, but they weren't really in my mind much during the time that they were popular. So I learned a lot about them, and it was important to me to read something from Southern California because I'm trying to aim my reading more towards California books right now. And California, Southern California is something I'm not really very familiar with because I've always been a Northern California resident except for a couple of months when my first baby was born. I stayed, maybe was just a month, in Vista, California, which is down in the area between Los Angeles and San Diego. I have never even seen San Diego yet. I actually might be going there soon to visit my sister, so I will see San Diego for the first time when I get there. However, at this point I've never seen it before, and I just want to read more about Southern California because it just sort of is, it's a balance. I want a balance in my California reading instead of making it all about Northern California, which I'm very familiar with, like from the Central California area on up to where I live at the very top of the state. So anyhow, Hollywood Eden was a California book for me. I also audio read Christy by Catherine Marshall. I gave it 5 stars. Oh, going back to Hollywood Eden, 3 stars. It wasn't like the most exciting book in the world. It was interesting to hear how they went after one song after another trying to get those #1 hits. And okay, glad it wasn't me because that sounds really driven, but I guess if you want to be in the music industry you do that. Okay, back to Christy. Christy by Catherine Marshall is said to be the first Christian novel ever written. It was just a really good story about a woman. At the age of 19 she decided to go live in the Appalachians with a community that didn't have much outside contact, and they had never had a school before, and it was a really interesting story of what she found there and the things that she went through there. And a lot of it was biographical. It was the author's mother who was the real Christy. That wasn't her name. Uh, Christy is a fictional character, but very much based on the mother of the author. So, totally recommend that. Gave it 5 stars, and I think whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, you would probably enjoy that. It's a little bit of a romance and a little bit of pioneer school teacher, and it's just a really nice way to become familiar with the people that lived in the mountains there. So I finished a few other books. Falling Up by Shel Silverstein. There were some things in there that I did not think were appropriate for children. It's known as a children's poetry book. Your mileage may vary, but there was just some things there that I did not like. So, Hind's Feet in High Places is a Christian allegory fiction written by a woman who was a dedicated Christian. She was a missionary in Israel, I think in Haifa, Israel, for a long time. At the time she was inspired to write this, she was in Switzerland, and at the end of the allegory there is a few pages from her journal that she kept while she was in Switzerland on vacation. So after reading the allegory about the mountains and the streams and all the hardships that the main character went through to get to the finish of the story, well, you recognize those places when you read her journal and look at the pictures. I had, of course, to look at pictures on the internet of the places that she was talking about in her journal in the Swiss Alps because, well, I've never been there, and I wanted to see and feel the grandeur of it and understand what she was writing about in her book. I think that was a great experience reading Hind's Feet in High Places, and I recommend it. Valley of Little Rivers is a local book. I loved it for the history. I thought that the author's writing was very descriptive. There was just a little bit too much information dumping, or maybe description of the area rather than actually moving on with the story. So I got a little frustrated with it in there, but overall I thought it was a really good book. I love local histories. I really, really do. And so I can't even tell you where to get it. It's very hard to get. So it's not available on Amazon, and that makes it hard for anyone to get. So another book that I read and finished was The World Rushed In, The California Gold Rush Experience. Yes, I finally finished it. I have been reading that for months. I read it very slowly. I enjoyed it. It was mostly about his journey from New York to California. 3 chapters were about his experience in California. He was a Christian man. His name was William Swain. He kept diaries. He wrote letters to his family. His family wrote letters to him, and all of that was in the book, along with a little narrative from the author J.S. Holliday. And it gives you a pretty good picture of what it was like to be a minor 49er. However, he did not go for the sinful stuff because he was a Christian. So there were no stories about him losing all his money in San Francisco, because a lot of the miners, they would take their gold dust, go to San Francisco and gamble and do other nefarious things that they shouldn't have been doing, and then end up broke and having to go back to the gold fields. Well, he didn't do that. He actually made a little bit of money gold prospecting, and then went back to see his wife with a little money in his pocket, so it was a good thing. Now, I DNF'd a book I did not like. I don't even have it here. Okay, I did not like The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I got about 50 pages into it, and I counted the number of incidents of sexual information, and it was a fiction, but the sexual information in 50 pages, there was 5 incidents that I was not comfortable with, and one of them was somewhat graphic. Well, it was pretty graphic. It was a rape. So it just was not a good book for me to be reading. So that one got DNF'd at 50 pages, and I probably shouldn't have read it that long. And then I have decided to stall on a few books. I stalled on The Stammering Century and Think Then Be Thin. It's not that I don't want to read those books, it was just that they were going to be long-term reads, and right now I have some short-term goals that I need to work on, and mainly it's the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge, which I have been doing every year for 5 or 6 years, and so I want to put those books at the top of my reading list and get that challenge out of the way. I have to read 50 books for the challenge. There's 50 different prompts, and I right now have 13 more to read. So after I finish reading those 13 books, I'll feel more comfortable about going back to things like The Stammering Century, which is going to take me a long time to read. It's just a really slow book, nonfiction. And I have a few more here that I'm probably going to stall on. Now these are the books, I have them right here, that I'm still reading. I'm still reading The Barbary Coast, which is nonfiction about the crime that took place in San Francisco between the gold rush and the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, when they were calling the criminal area of San Francisco the Barbary Coast. So I find this interesting. I started reading it a long time ago for novel research because I was writing a novel about a woman in early San Francisco in the 1850s, and I wanted to know more about what it might have been like, but I stalled on it a long time ago. So one of the prompts in the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge is to read a book that you have DNF'd in the past, and so this book came to mind. I was really happy that it was chosen in the BookTube spin. That's perfect for me. And I find it pretty interesting. I mean, some horrible things went on, and nobody likes to know that horrible things are going on or went on, or people were hurt, or terrible things happened, but still, it's fascinating. Herbert Asbury, the author, he also wrote The Gangs of New York, and he wrote a book about crimes in early New Orleans and I think Chicago, I'm not sure, but he just made a series of this type of book in different cities. So interesting if you want to know about old stories of criminal behavior in early San Francisco. And then getting into fiction, I've been reading Tessa Afshar's book, Jewel of the Nile. I wrongly told you that this was not a Christian book because I thought this was something that took place in the long distant past, because Amazon has it classified as ancient history fiction, and it actually takes place in the 1st century after the passing of Jesus Christ. So this main character is a Christian. It doesn't really mention too much about her being a Christian other than just that she is, and maybe it'll talk about it more as I get further into it. I'm not really very far into this book yet, and I'm even thinking about putting it aside for a while because it doesn't really get me any closer to finishing the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge right now, so I might put it away and read it later. I was going to read it for a prompt to read a book that was published this year, but I have already done that because I read Hollywood Eden, which was also published this year. So the other BookTube spin novel was California Gold, and I am not going to finish this by the end of September. I just do not believe I have it in me. I really don't. I'm not very far into it. Maybe about 100 pages. No, 160 pages. So there's actually some sexual information in this novel as well. I don't know why novelists just can't manage to write without talking about sexual encounters. It kind of bugs me because I don't want to read that stuff, but it isn't like 5 incidents in 50 pages, and in the first 160 pages there's been maybe 2 scenes that I was not comfortable with, so not too bad. And it is California, so you know I want to read about California, so I'm going to read this. Oh, that was my phone. making a noise. Um, I'm going to read it. Yeah, I'm going to read it. And then I have some other books that I'm still reading. I mentioned that I finished Restart, perhaps. Did I mention that? Restart. Yeah. All those juvenile books I said I was going to read, this is the only one that I actually finished. And I really liked this book. It was about a boy who fell off his parents' roof, hit his head, was in a coma, and when he woke up he had an amnesia, couldn't remember his mother, couldn't remember his own name, and then he went back to school, and come to find out, all the kids there thought he was this horrible bully. And he doesn't remember being a bully, so he turns into a really nice kid, and complete personality change after this amnesia starts, and his friends that he had when he was a bully, oh, they're not happy because they want him to go back to being a bully. So it was a pretty interesting book. There was nothing objectionable in this book. It was wonderful. I liked it a lot, and I gave it 4 stars at Goodreads. So I've started reading the cat book, Whittington, by Alan Armstrong, and so far so good, but I'm not very far into it, so I'm going to continue on with that. Jack Gantos, Dead in Norval. Can't believe this thing. Won the Newbery Medal in 2012, and I do not like this book at all. I'm exactly halfway through it, and it is very morbid. There's a lot of gallows humor. There are mortuary scenes, obituaries, all kinds of things associated with death, and it's supposed to be funny. But you see, I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's appropriate for children. I don't like it. I just don't. And the only reason I'm reading this, well, partly for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge, and partly because I want to read all the Newbery Medal books. So I won't give up on this book and go read something else. I'll continue on with it, and I'll probably give it 1 star. We'll see. If it doesn't get incredibly better in the last half of the book, it's going to get 1 star because I just don't like the things he's writing about. Personal preference. So I have a couple of Christian books now. I am still reading Discovering the Joy of Jesus, Basic Bible Studies for Everyone. The Guide to the Book of Philippians. Still reading that one. And then for the Sisters in Christ Book Club, I am still reading Just Open the Door. It is a book about hospitality. I'm about halfway through it, and in part it's kind of like little memoirs about the author's life, because she's a very hospitable person, so she takes little stories out of her own life to show how wonderful hospitality is. And I have been very hospitable in the past, but me living in a travel trailer right now, I'm not so hospitable as I used to be, because it's a small space and I don't really have room in here. I don't have room in here for guests, but I think it's a beautiful thing, hospitality, and it served her well, and she's writing about it with just a lot of enthusiasm and grace. So I like the book a lot. And the other book that I said I was going to get to, but that I did not get to at all, was The Headless Cupid. So that's going to be probably my first book to pick up and start in the month of September. So that's it for my August wrap-up. I think I have covered everything. Oh, there is one more. The All 13 book about the boys that were lost in the cave. And okay, right now my books, most of them are out in my van because we had a little scare around here. There was a forest fire coming our way, and the sheriff came here and said he's going to give us an evacuation warning because they weren't sure at that time that they would be able to stop the fire. And so they actually did put out update a couple of days ago that the fire is no longer expected to come destroy our town. Thank goodness, because I went through that last year, so as you can imagine, I was a little stressed, traumatized, and triggered by this new fire this year. But there isn't a lot of wind this time. Weather's holding out. The firefighters, even though there isn't really enough of them here, they're doing their best to stop this fire by putting in fire breaks. So, okay, no more fire news. Let's just go on to all 13. I do not have a copy of it with me because it's out in my van somewhere. I already packed it, and I was trying to keep out the books that I was still reading, but that one somehow got packed instead. So a little confusion. I don't like my stuff being in such upheaval, but hopefully when I bring it back into this trailer, I will be able to organize it better. That is my hope. And so that's it. I will do my TBR in another video, and thank you so much for listening. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news that we will not have a fire coming through our town in the next week or two. So, happy reading, everybody. I think I'm going to go read some books tonight, because I need to get more books off my reading list. I've got too much on there right now. I'm trying to control it. I really am. Last month I reduced my reading list at Goodreads from 14 books to 10 books, and I kept it at 10 books all month long, not adding another book until I finished one. And this month I want to take it down to 8 books. And eventually it's going to go down to 5 or 6 books, because I just don't want to be reading that many books at one time, because quite frankly I can't get through that many in a day. I don't want to have any more than what I can read a little bit of each day. Okay, end of video. Talk to you in another one. Bye.